When 911 is called for mental health crises, unfortunately, some people end up getting killed by those meant to serve and protect us. LAPD in particular shoots more people suffering from mental health crises than the national average. Why do people with mental health conditions die at the hands of the LAPD? We wanted to find out because knowing why could literally make a difference between life and death. The Controller's Office did an assessment of the LAPD's Mental Evaluation Unit, or MEU, which is the police unit whose main role is to respond to mental health calls. Specifically, we focused on the Mental Evaluation Unit's SMART teams, which are two-person teams of one armed police officer and one mental health clinician from the LA County Department of Mental Health. LAPD SMART units are tasked with co-responding, along with patrol units, to mental health calls for help. So what did we find out in our assessment? First, we found that when it comes to responding to mental health calls, LAPD requires armed police officers to respond. And it requires that the response be led by patrol units and not the SMART teams. This means that contrary to what may be widely assumed, that if you call 911 for a mental health episode, then the city would respond with a mental health first, unarmed approach. The reality is that mental health calls are mainly handled by either an LAPD armed patrol unit alone, or by an armed LAPD patrol unit in the lead, along with a SMART team, which is actually also armed as a secondary responder. The SMART team does include a mental health clinician, but they are not allowed to engage until a patrol unit okays it. We've recommended to the LAPD that they should revise their policy to allow SMART teams to lead responses to mental health calls that don't involve weapons. We also found that SMART is mainly focused on two things: providing relief to patrol officers when it comes to mental health calls, and placing people in involuntary mental health detentions. We recommend that instead, the LAPD should find ways to measure SMART's impact on mental health calls beyond how often they free up patrol officers. And the role of mental health clinicians should be reevaluated so they're used in more ways beyond just doing involuntary detentions of people. Along the same lines, we found that the only performance metric that the LAPD has for SMART teams is how quickly SMART officers relieve patrol officers from on-scene duties. There's no metric tracked for SMART's impact on mental health incidents or use of force. All LAPD tracks is how quickly SMART frees up patrol officers. We recommend that the LAPD develop ways to measure SMART's impact on mental health incidents and on use of force incidents. We looked into use of force. Back to SMART being tasked with co-responding to mental health calls. Well, since 2021, LAPD is supposed to be dispatching or should be dispatching SMART along with patrol units at the same time. However, we found that in 2022, that did not happen in 96% of mental health calls. Instead, an LAPD patrol unit alone was the initial responder. So, as it's effectively usually only a secondary response to patrol units, SMART ends up having barely any impact on uses of force or outcomes. We also looked at LAPD's mental health intervention training, known as MHIT. MHIT is actually a department-wide, one-time training that only covers basic principles. LAPD's mental evaluation unit and SMART officers take the same MHIT training that any rookie LAPD officer takes. And when we compared officers who had gone through LAPD's mental health intervention training versus those who had not, we found hardly any difference in their rates of use of force. The last of our main findings for this video is we found that the LAPD fails to give its officers needed tools for mental health calls. For example, the LAPD doesn't have any clear policy guidance for how officers should deal with mental health crises. The LAPD requires police officers to handcuff people in mental health crisis. LAPD patrol officers are the ones entrusted to lead responses to mental health calls, but not all of their patrol officers have received the mental health intervention training. SMART officers are the officers that LAPD designates specifically to respond to mental health calls, but even they are required to be armed. And again, SMART is not allowed to lead responses to mental health calls. Instead, even though they're billed as a co-responder model, SMART are there as secondary responders. We've recommended that the LAPD revise its policies to direct officers on how to de-escalate, to give officers clear guidance on how to deal with mental health crises, to eliminate the handcuffing of nonviolent people in mental health crisis, to require more training for MEU officers and all sworn officers, and to allow SMART teams to lead responses to mental health calls that don't involve weapons. One additional recommendation that we have made is that the mayor and the city council continue to support and fund the city's unarmed model of crisis response pilot, and should consider expanding it if the pilot demonstrates successful alternatives to armed responses. A mental health condition or crisis should not be a death sentence. We are urging the LAPD to adopt our recommendations now, and we're urging the city to make a serious investment in alternate and unarmed crisis response. Check out our full report on our website.